let's say many of us do not understand how even the international humanitarian organization can, become present in our in our all respective countries, and they are there for such a long time, and year to year you hear a predicted story of the country. For example, I am from Ethiopia. I hear there will be a drought for next year, such and such millions of people will need, and you wonder, aren't we working? Aren't our farmers are producing? And they are there for such a long time. So but there is a process for them to be there. So just walk us through how they become present in a country, and then why they are there for such a long time, and why African countries should be concerned.
Yeah, I say, in 1994, a department was established by the United Nations. It's called the Department of Humanitarian Affairs. It was part of the United Nations Secretariat. And the function of the Department of Humanitarian Affairs, which has now become OCHA, which I'm working for, they changed the name 2 decades ago, was set up when you have crisis, sudden onset disasters. It could be an earthquake, a typhoon, flooding that overwhelms the capacity of the country to immediately address them. The UN has a system that can move to support a country for some time, 6 months, then hand over and leave. And that is the intent. It's for sudden onset disaster. So these are international humanitarian actors who move into this situation and they leave. But just like international humanitarian system have started expanding, the whole aid industry has exploded. International humanitarian system have grown. And I think it started being driven by perverse incentive. I started speaking up against this, having worked in many contexts that I saw was development related. I go to some countries where they want to appeal, and I ask, why do you want to appeal? Why do you want to go out there now? Let me give you an example. For 2022, in December last year, about many countries, close to 30, but 26 came out to appeal for international humanitarian assistance, which I call begging, basically. The events I had mostly in Europe and North America. Basically, they are saying, a notice was sent out. 14 of those countries are from Africa. There are 2 regional appeals, so the majority are from Africa. Last year was the same. These countries declared that they are going to face crisis in 2022 by December 2021. So they're already preparing themselves to face crisis that they would need appeal for. The predominant sudden onset natural disasters happen in Southeast Asia. They don't happen in Africa. We had the Mozambique that happened, the cyclone 2 years ago, but that is rare. It's amazing that we have a tool that was set up to support sudden onset disaster and leave. It's predominantly spreading every year in Africa where we don't have a sudden onset disaster. And these are some of the challenges. So if you have the 16 countries, 14 countries and 2 regional bodies that are going to appeal, we don't have the money yet. When we hear sometimes, we're going to be raising about 2.5 billion or 200 billion for humanitarian assistance, I think there are many African countries who allow themselves to go on the appeal because they think maybe we're going to get like 300 million. No, I've been trying to tell them that we don't have the money yet. Through the year, we will go out there, international humanitarian actors, we go out to the world and start begging for that money. Basically, the 14 countries that are listed, plus the 2 regional bodies, they will have words like crisis, poverty, malnutrition, facing famine. Those are the, catastrophic humanitarian crisis. So those are the kind of words that would predominantly be used in the context of those 14 countries that are appealing. So by the time the year ends, the full amount will not be raised, but you will think of some of the countries, and that is what you will hear. So there are 16 African countries, including regions, that are going to be going out to the public to explain that they have problems, they are suffering, they are miserable, there's insecurity, and widespread insecurity. I've allowed international actors to come and help them, and they are begging for money. Who will want to go on to visit? Who will want to go for tourism in a place like that? Why would I leave my country and go to a place like that? And this is the way the international humanitarian system works. So any African country that puts itself out there does not reflect on why, then they will face a future where their name will be spread out there. Now, there are some countries that have been on the begging list for over 2 decades. Democratic Republic of Congo, with all its riches and resources, is one of the countries that have been begging for international humanitarian aid for the last over 20 years. Do you know, it was reported, and this is true, when Ebola was discovered in Goma, a woman said it was divine favor. You know why? Because she felt international actors will now come and they'll be able to get maybe jobs. Another challenge there is that when international humanitarian actors come with all the vans and all, they come as a presence of affluence. That was not what the UN intended it to be. It's supposed to be, now it's become some of the highest employers. So when international actors come, there's a bloated economy in the community where they work. So hotels prices spiral. Most of the accommodation, the locals cannot afford them. It brings with it, so you can imagine Democratic Republic of Congo with all the wealth. We all have cell phones because of Democratic Republic of Congo. Electric cars these days, the resources to power them come from the Congo. But Congolese are one of the poorest. Congo goes to the international community to beg for international aid and has been doing that for 20 years. Now, as I mentioned, the rationale for having international humanitarian action is that you have a crisis. And that crisis surpasses your ability to address them. So when you leave an international humanitarian presence in your country for over 20 years with no exit strategy, what are you saying? You're saying you've been having a crisis for 20 years. And this is what has been expanding in Africa. Every year, these countries that are launched, that are begging, are announced, Africans just operate in oblivion to it. They're, I think, oblivious to the impact, the implication to the country. They just announced 16 countries, this amount, and the numbers grow every year. You know, the industry is an employer of many people, you know, and it's growing. So every year the numbers increase. And I've challenged some of my colleagues. If we are effective, the number should reduce. Why is it that it increases every year? You know, so this is how it works. Nigeria is one of the most recent members into it. Good news too, there are many countries that realize the damaging impact and they leave. Kenya is one of them. Kenya is not on the list of countries begging. There are some countries that have emerged from it. I mean, we have to look at some successes too. Look at Rwanda, for instance. When they had the crisis, then they needed some aid, and it came, and they finished with it, and they moved on. They are no longer appealing for international humanitarian assistance every year. But it took a leadership that was very clear of what the impact was for Rwanda to move away. Now, to finish here, and I know it's long, to finish here, you know, international humanitarian presence must be rationalized. That's why the narrative of our presence must talk about the negatives. So I could fly into Ethiopia, see all the Lalibela, beautiful. I will go search for that place in Somali region or one remote village and use it as an image to raise funds. So it's the negative that sell. We brand Africa with the negative so that we can rationalize international humanitarian presence. So any other activities, any other African countries are taking on, economic activities, rebranding does not make sense. If while you're rebranding, there's some active global machine that promotes the region as conflict ridden, you know, illness, disease ridden, the worst kind of scenario. How can you rebrand yourself positively? I finished. Let's look at Ebola. Let's look at COVID-19. Isn't it interesting that the minute COVID came, even before we noted its presence in Africa, there was already in the machine rowing that the people will be dead on the streets, fundraising. For when did that all happen? They wanted to disease the continent by all means, and that is what. That is my passion. That's why I'm saying protracted international humanitarian presence. Africa should be concerned because any activities we're taking on is meaningless. It's like pouring water in a basket. with homes. You're just investing in different activities. Let's promote tourism. No, it's going to happen. Because like I emphasized again, there's an international machine, oiled, huge global system that is promoting the worst of Africa under the name of international humanitarian assistance. Thank you, Mahlet.